Welcome to the Life in the Red podcast presented by the Lincoln Journal-Star, your source for Husker news, analysis, and more. From football in the fall to recruiting in the summer, we've got you covered. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Basnett, Parker Gabriel, and Stephen M. Sipple.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome in, Life in the Red podcast. I'm Chris, there's Steve, there's Parker. It is 2:26 p.m. here on Friday, January 28th, 2022. We're almost 1 month into the new year. Plenty to talk about. Well, depending on your point of view, I guess we're going to talk some hoops. There may not be a whole lot to talk about there considering the record. We'll talk a little football, kind of where the program sits now as we kind of near the second signing day next week and get within a month or so of spring ball here. And we'll also touch on baseball. The baseball team opened practice today. I'm going to mute my notifications on my Slack right now because they're beeping at me. It's loud.
What's going on Slack?
People are just slacking around.
Typical like Journal-Star slacking.
Typical Journal-Star slacking. What are you doing, right? What's going on at Sipple's house right now?
It's slacking. I mean, just being a sports writer.
Yeah. So how many times have you looked at the Lincoln Journal-Star Slack channel?
Sipple, do you have Slack even downloaded on your laptop?
Do you know what Slack is?
Yeah, I think I saw it once and I decided I wasn't going to partake.
This doesn't look like me. I think I'm just going to jet out of here.
I hear that they have like the Slack commercial on TV now, and every time I hear the sound, I have a reaction to it. Like, it's not good. It's not really a healthy situation.
I look back toward where our home office. I'm like, oh no, never mind. That was a commercial.
Hey, I got a question. Hey, Bass, can you do the Slack sound for us?
No,
hard to
not
do?
really. No, it's hard to do. It's a very mechanical, computery sound. It's kind of like
it's almost like
that was good. That was good. Do that again.
Yeah, it's not bad.
That was good. Said the guy who's never heard a Slack notification in his life.
But now I know sort of what if I ever decide to partake.
There you go. You'd be like, oh, I bet that was Slack.
Yeah. Oh, that was Slack.
All right.
It's the off season. Can you tell? Except for hoops.
Did you send any Slack messages to the newsroom today?
Today? No, I have sent messages before.
Have you?
Yeah. I've exchanged Slack messages with Parker and our young Nathan Head.
Yeah. Sparks.
With Victoria, with young Sparky.
All right.
So,
well,
all right.
Maybe that could be something I do late in life.
Late in life? Well, you're already late in life, aren't you?
Yeah.
Like you're kind of in the sunset years. The sun's setting a little bit. The shadows are getting long.
Yeah. The naps are getting longer.
The naps are getting longer. May not wake up from one of them.
So one day it's just a really long one.
Yeah, it's just a really long one.
Mercifully, it would.
Okay, all right. Let's move on.
So,
it's getting
on a brighter note. Let's talk about Nebraska.
Yeah, on something happier. Let's talk about Nebraska basketball. Dropped to 6-14 last night, 0-9 in the Big Ten after the 73-65 loss to Wisconsin. Wisconsin came in playing on the road in the Big Ten, didn't play very good. Leading scorer had 0 points at halftime, and Wisconsin was pretty comfortably ahead most of the way after the first 5-10 minutes or so. Led by as many as 18 in the second half. Nebraska kind of closed the gap there over the last bit of the second half to make it a little more respectable. But another loss, 12th in their last 13 games. The only win in that stretch is over Kennesaw State at home. Nebraska's 0-13 against power conference opponents this season. It's grim. It is grim. Rutgers comes to town Saturday. Then you got a road trip to Michigan, then a couple more home games after that. Northwestern, Minnesota, 2 games that are, I would say, winnable if you want to look at winnable games. So, Sip, you kind of wrote it last night. In this stretch for these next 5 at home, this is where Nebraska needs to show a little bit of progress. And from what we saw last night, didn't see a lot of progress. Now they were coming off the COVID pause, hadn't played in 10 days, playing at 4 p.m., pretty flat atmosphere, which is understandable considering the team's record and the time of day that game was played out on a Thursday. But this 5-game stretch kind of off to a rough start and a pretty key stretch for Nebraska if they want to try and build any kind of momentum here over the second half of Big Ten.
Yeah, these 5 games, including Wisconsin, this is the easiest stretch of schedule you can find, and partially because there's 4 home games in it. Now, I don't know. I don't know that I would call it key. Because I don't know where Trev Alberts is in the way he's sizing all this up. But yeah, Baz, you said it pretty well. I think if they're going to build momentum, this is the time to do it. And you could do it. I think they, again, Rutgers on Saturday. Rutgers is 107th, or they were 107th to begin the week in the net rankings. At Michigan. Now, Michigan's beating you by 35.
Michigan's playing a little better. That's going to be a tough game.
A little better. And they're 38th in the net.
Yeah.
Then you have Northwestern and Minnesota in Lincoln. Northwestern was 81st in the net, Minnesota 79th. And let's just be very real. If I'm Trev Alberts, I'm looking at that and saying, if you can't beat Northwestern and Minnesota on your home floor right now, then and if those are then what would they be, the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th straight losses in the Big Ten, then what are we doing at that point? You're sort of, and you're trying to tell the rest of your coaches that we're emphasizing the competitive part of this, all this. We're trying to perform at an elite level. Every decision you make, I want it to be elite. But meanwhile, the basketball team's 0-13 in the Big Ten and can't win those games on their home floor. The message would be, it wouldn't jibe. So it's getting awkward is, I guess, what I'm talking about.
I agree. I'll throw Rutgers in there too. Nebraska beat Rutgers by 20 last year in Lincoln. And Rutgers went to the NCAA tournament, So this isn't that. Let's not just throw that game out, even though Rutgers blew them out a couple weeks ago. But yeah, you're right. It's awkward. It's weird. And last night was weird. It was a weird vibe, I thought, in PBA, and part of that was just, again, the weird time of day. But it's getting to that point now. I'm very curious to see what a Saturday noon tip against Northwestern looks like. Or a Saturday noon tip against Wisconsin next week, or Northwestern next week. An 8 p.m. home tip against Minnesota. There's games you can win, but what are those crowds going to look like? And we've seen this before. We saw it late in the Tim Miles era, where it was just kind of everybody was waiting for the next bad thing to happen. It feels a lot like that to me. Maybe not quite to that point fully yet, but it feels pretty similar. And they just need something good to happen at this point, and nothing good has happened. They got Trey McGowan's back, and they're 0-2 since he came back. And it's tough to see a way out of this that ends positively for Nebraska basketball this season as far as wins and losses, because even Northwestern, they're not great. They're good enough that it's going to be tough to beat them. Minnesota is not great, but they're good enough, and everybody else are going to play down the stretch here. There's nothing easy. And we've talked about this before. Nobody wants to be the team that loses to Nebraska. Nobody wants to be that first team in the Big Ten that loses to Nebraska, whether you're competing for an NCAA tournament spot or not, whatever. You don't want to be that team that's the first one that Nebraska beats. So look, they're in a tough spot. They're up against it. And it's tough to watch. It's tough to watch loss after loss, and the same things happen over and over and over in those losses. And Sip, you saw it last night, the poor shot selection at times. When Wisconsin got on a run, Nebraska got quick on offense. There wasn't a lot of ball movement. It's the same stuff we've seen over and over and over. They got killed on the glass again. You saw offensive rebounds leading to wide open threes, especially early on. And they're losing, yes, but they're losing in the exact same ways over and over and over again. It's not a good picture right now for Nebraska.
I'm not sure what Fred can do. That's that's
kind of the point I was trying to get to. Yes.
I just don't know. I mean, people say, well, let's have a productive discussion. What can Fred change? I don't. He tried to run the offense more through Derek Walker. Now, Baz, my read on that was the Big Ten adjusted pretty fast to that.
Yeah, they've shot it better percentage-wise since doing that, but it takes more than shooting a good percentage.
They also get away from it sometimes in games, like early in the game yesterday. They hit some shots from the outside, and then then it just goes right back to that.
Yes,
play on the perimeter. And then you go into a long scoring drive. It's like, oh shoot, yeah, we should go back to playing through Walker. And then they.
Yeah, they had a stretch.
Yeah, go ahead. Go.
They had an 18-minute stretch, half a game last night, like this, the last half of the first half, the first part of the second half, where they went 4 for 28 from the field. I mean, and how many of those SIP did we watch where it was dribble down, one pass, dribble down, no pass, chuck something up after you dribbled around a lot and go back and have to play defense. I mean, we've seen it every game. And that's where it got away from Nebraska. And, Fred said it after the game. And look, these press conferences are tough because you have to try to explain these things. But Fred said, well, if you get rid of that stretch, then we're right in the game. So if you get rid of half the game, you're right in the game, basically.
Right.
And I'm not trying to make fun of Fred or anything. I mean, you say
he's really professional. He's really professional.
Yeah. But I mean, that's what it is right now. They cannot get out of their own way, even though they know what the problems are. They recognize what the problems are. They cannot, for whatever reason, get out of their own way and make this thing work for 40 minutes and give themselves a better chance.
Yeah. The COVID, Fred, we talked about the COVID thing. That I always resist that conversation. It's really easy. I mean, you can really just go right to the Nebraska women who missed a week with COVID and came back last night and weren't perfect, but they won by 33. They beat Wisconsin by 30.
They also probably played the worst team in the conference last night.
That's true. That makes a difference. Anyway.
Problem is Nebraska is the worst team in the conference on the men's side, so there's no one to get right again.
Wisconsin was interesting to me. I always always a little bit leery of Fred's style because it's so reliant on the three. Wisconsin is an example of a team that they tried to pound it inside, shot terribly from inside the paint, inside the arc. But they do have the versatility where they, in a situation like that, they have a guy like Brad Davison, and a couple other shooters that takes care of the problem. Nebraska doesn't have that. Go ahead. Go.
No, go ahead, Sip. Keep going.
I was going to say Wisconsin's a team that if they're not hitting the 3-pointer, they can pound it inside.
Yes,
and that's what I always try to relate to people is. That's why I'm uncomfortable with Fred's kind of the way he approaches things. Michigan will be that way. If they're not hitting outside, there's a 7-footer to pound it into who's good. Nebraska doesn't really have that option.
Here's a stat for you from the game last night. I think Wisconsin in the first half of that game was 4 for 24 on 2-point shots. Think about how bad that is.
It's terrible
for a Big Ten team. And for the game, They were 1 for 22 on mid-range jumpers, like long twos, basically.
Yeah.
Pitiful numbers.
Pitiful.
And they were never really challenged in that game. Think about that. Because like you said, they have an experienced guy in Brad Davison who's done it before against Nebraska. They've got a really solid point guard in Chucky, and we don't need to belabor that point anymore. The fact that he grew up right down the road. But first possession of the game, what happens? Wisconsin is in a scramble situation. Chucky gets the ball and buries a 3 right in Alonzo Verge's face. Kind of tells you where it's at.
I know.
Right?
I know.
So you're right. Wisconsin has an identity. Wisconsin's it reminds me of their really good teams. And Parker could probably speak to this better than I can, but it reminds me of their really good teams where it's your typical Wisconsin, but they've got a star in Johnny Davis, and he just changes their whole dynamic. He wasn't great last night, but you still have to pay attention to him. And Nebraska had to do that. That left Brad Davison open quite a bit. Brad Davison hits 5 threes in the first half, and they're off and running. So that's a really, really good Wisconsin team. Let's give them some credit.
Yeah, Sipple made a good point. When I was talking to Sipple last night, he made a good point, which is that at the end of the day, like Wisconsin this year, they're good defensively. They're not elite. Ken Palm's got them ranked like in the around 35th or something like that in the country defensively, but they crash the glass and they play defense. And those are two things that are really those are controllables, right? Like you can't just roll out of bed with a bunch of 6-foot guys in the Big Ten and be a good rebounding team, but a lot of it's about effort,
Yeah.
And so is playing defense. And so Sipple said to me last night, he said, well, they rebound hard and they play defense. And if you do that, there's like a baseline level that you're going to be at. Now everybody's got nights where they play bad, and they've looked The Wisconsin team, like they're good, but they needed overtime to beat like Illinois State after Christmas or something like that. Like it's certainly not infallible, but there's a consistency level in the program, and it's in a lot of Big Ten teams because they have multiple things that they do really well.
Yeah.
And the thing that they have multiple tools that they can go to in their toolbox on any given night. And sometimes all of them fail and you look like crap and that's just the way it goes. But like Nebraska is sort of like to overgeneralize it. It's like they thought they were going to be a good shooting team, but they're not. So they're bad.
So what? Yeah. Then what?
Yeah. It's like there was no recourse once the amount of time, and it was from Western Illinois on early in the season. You're like, well, 29 games left, 30 games left, they'll get it going. But when they didn't, there was no second act for this team. There was no like, well, they don't shoot it well, but maybe they can win some games because of this, and this. No, it's just like the one thing fell, and that was it.
Yeah. Guard, Baz, you heard Greg Gard, Parker, if you listen to the postgame. Greg Gard, what did he say, Baz? He said, I asked him, how'd you feel about the way your team plays? He said, we only played well in spurts.
Yeah, played well in spurts. Yeah.
And he said, we played well in spurts. And he said, I thought it was going to be a race to 100. But here's what he said that was interesting to me. He said, what got us on track was we brought some guys off the bench who got our defense set. Started playing good defense. Yeah. That's not a tool Nebraska has in its tool bag. No. You'll never hear Fred Hoiberg say we went to the bench and then we turned up the defense. That's not really a tool for Nebraska.
Yeah.
They don't really
it never has been. And not that we expected it to be under Fred Hoiberg, but you got to play some semblance of defense at some point.
They do sometimes.
You've got to sometimes. I mean, they can turn teams over and they can get teams late into the shot clock, but part of defense is rebounding. Part of defense is stopping the possession and getting the ball back. God,
that's a great point. Yeah.
I thought that was something Bryce McGowan said last night that I thought was interesting. They play good defense a lot of times, and it's almost like they seem happy that they got the shot forced, that they don't get the rebound, and we can talk about size and this and that. Western Illinois had a 6'2" guard that had 9 rebounds against Nebraska. It ain't size, that's part of it. Yes. But it's want to, and it's having some pride in it and wanting to finish possessions. And like I said, part of playing defense is rebounding.
That's a great point.
Getting a stop means you get a stop. It means you've got the ball and you're going the other way. It doesn't mean they got the offensive rebound. Now you got to play defense for 30.
That's a good point that people don't always think about that, but that is the end point for sure.
Or
it's also the biggest difference. I mean, it's not like Nebraska was good last year, but I think like the metrics would say this, and it seems like it when you watch them too. I mean, it's also the biggest difference between last year's team and this year's team. I mean, neither was particularly good offensively, but they could hang their hat on defense most nights last year. They weren't great, but I think they were top 50 in the country or something like that.
They could do enough. Yeah.
Now they're not.
Yeah. It's just, it's tough to see. It's tough to see answers. And the other part of this is too, okay, you beat Rutgers at home, great. That you got one win in the Big Ten, maybe, and then you go on the road, lose at Michigan. Everybody expects that. Then you come home. Let's see, you beat Northwestern and Minnesota. You win 2 in a row. Oh, great! You beat Northwestern and Minnesota, 2 of the other teams that are probably going to be in the play-in games at the Big Ten tournament. So it's almost you don't even win by winning, if that makes sense. Like, yes, you've got wins, but you're also beating the bottom tier of the Big Ten along with. And I understand that you need wins, but. I mean,
the players, Baz, I think you're right. In the fans' eyes, it won't be a lot, but the players need it bad.
They do. They do.
Those players need something good right now badly.
Yes.
And beating a team from the Big Ten, no matter who it is, would qualify. And maybe like you said, would spark a little something.
They're also. Oh, go ahead, Sipple.
I was just going to say spark a little something that maybe gives your boss something to think about. Yeah. Maybe gives the AD something to think about.
They're also getting into this danger zone, though, where, like, so many teams in the Big Ten have a lot to play for. Like, every night that's, like, the team – like Wisconsin last night, they win. They get back into a tie with Illinois in first place in the Big Ten. I think they play at Illinois next week sometime. Like, there's either teams that are in that or they're, like, lining up for bubble life and, you can't – And then there's the pride thing where it's like, at this point, like I think they're going to get good shots from teams too, like in general, because nobody wants to be the team that loses to Nebraska.
Oh, God.
And gives them their first or only or whatever win. So it's not to say they can't do it. Like, yeah, Rutgers and Northwestern and Minnesota, they're all winnable games for sure, and they could get somebody like sort of like we've been saying all year. Like, if they get hot, they're going to be dangerous and they could knock somebody off. But like, I just don't, at this point, like, calendar hits February and teams are either playing for a championship or, in championship range, or they're playing for their tournament hopes. And there's not going to be any let up, right?
We need to learn from, we can all learn from this stuff. I mean, it's horrible. Baz, you always, you're reciting those records, and if you let them sink in, they're just awful. But the thing you learn, what my big takeaway is from both Hoiberg situation and Frost situation? My big takeaway is if you lose at that rate, you're so vulnerable in so many ways.
Yeah.
You just become vulnerable. What am I talking about? Okay, vulnerable to the media. You can't take a hard enough swipe at Fred right now. I mean,
yeah,
it's sad. I mean, I don't enjoy it. Nobody enjoys it, but Dirk Chatelain wrote a column. I'm sure it's really, it's rough, but what can Fred say? What could Frost say? What could Frost say this year when I was taking swipes at him? They can't say anything, and they don't even try because they can't.
Yeah.
The record's the record.
The record's the record. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep.
And then, like what Parker's saying, is vulnerability. That's vulnerability. When people don't want to lose to you because they would be embarrassed to do so. You're vulnerable. I mean, it just creates an aura of vulnerability that's hard to deal with.
A bad spot to be.
You got to try to learn from it. And if I were a coach, I'd be watching it close and think, hey, guys, we never want to be in this position. It's because it leaves you in some very precarious situations. Your job, you're vulnerable in your job. It makes you vulnerable in recruiting. You might try a little too hard to do certain things. The media is the media. You got to deal with the damn media. You got to deal with the social media part of it. And there's really not much you can do about it.
It's interesting when you talk about Fred, because think about Fred and his last couple of years with the Bulls. Weren't very good record-wise. Got fired, 20 games into his last season there. Made the playoffs his first or second year and didn't get anywhere after that. Like he's been dealing with this. He dealt with it on a much larger scale in Chicago, and certainly a much larger scale than he's facing here. But it just the losing over and over and over and over again. You wonder. You talk about confidence with players. Where's Fred's confidence at right now? How shaken is he in what he does? And it's easy. Fred sits up there and says the right things because Fred's a professional. He's a gentleman and all those sorts of things. But he sits up there, and I truly believe that we can make this work, and I truly believe in what I do. But when he's sitting at home at night in the dark, does he truly believe that when he's thinking about it? I don't know. Maybe he does. But it's like that old Tim Miles line. It's a crisis of confidence right now for Nebraska. The players are low on it. You have to think the coaches are probably low on it, even though they have to put on the face that they're not. And like you said, the vulnerability part of this too is plays into it. And it's tough, man. It's tough, and it's tough to see it getting any better unless they can find a way, like you said, to find a couple wins here the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, if they hit 13 threes tomorrow against Rutgers, that would help.
Yeah, yes, it would.
Right. But Rutgers will be a bear. They'll be a bear.
Yeah, and then look, like we've talked about this. Like they had Ohio State beat. They had Ohio State beat at home. They were up 5 with 30 seconds left, less than 30 seconds left, and they lose that game. They went up to Michigan State and pushed that game deep into the second.
Good game.
Deep into the second half.
Yep.
They had NC State beat on the road at NC State. We talk like they're just completely incapable of doing it. They've had it. They've had their hands around several of these, and maybe that changes the whole tenor of the season. But at the same time, like we said, the record's the record. They found ways to lose those games. They couldn't get them over the line, and that's part of this too. So, yeah, I don't know. We talk about the same thing every week, and it gets tough to describe it every week, but that's what it is. They have to find a way to win, and have to find a way to win multiple just to, I think, have something good happen. And then you at least give Trev Alberts something to think about over the next month and a half.
Rutgers, its last 3 times out, has scored 48, 65, and 60.
Who'd they lose to just yesterday?
Maryland on Tuesday. They lost to Maryland.
They lost to Maryland.
68-60 at home.
Oh.
So, I mean, this is the thing. Like, if you wanted to look for reasons to think that the next 4 or 5 or whatever get better, I mean, one. I mean, I don't even want to call it a silver lining necessarily, but like at the start, like yesterday, Sipple, at the start of the game, they looked pretty good. They hit shots. Like, you knew they weren't going to shoot 72%, obviously. But the other part of it was I was sitting there, I was watching it early. I think I actually texted you that it was like a barn burner early in the game. And one of the things I was curious about was if Nebraska could keep its wind for a whole 40 minutes, just because of the number of guys they had out for a few days and you hadn't played in 10 and all of that. And it looked like they got tired, you know? So I do wonder if, you know, you got a couple games here to really get Trey McGowan's back in a rhythm and playing, and you get your win back a little bit after being off for 10 days. I mean, like, it's not impossible. It's not impossible. It doesn't seem likely, but it's not impossible for them to show up. But the thing about, like, so Rutgers is a perfect example, right? Like, that's a winnable game, but you're going to have to be tough to do it. Like, you're going to have to be tough. It's going to sort of be like going to the dentist, you know, like you're going to have to stand in and find a way to get a bucket in a tough circumstance at some point. It's like at some point when you wait so long to see a team do that, you get to a point where you just don't believe they will. And that's sort of where it's at, but it could. And they have, like, they could beat Rutgers, you know. Yeah.
Again, beat them last year out of nowhere. Yeah. It came out of nowhere and just smashed them last year. I mean, in kind of a similar situation. So, who knows?
What time is the game, Baz?
The Rutgers game is at 5:30 p.m. on Saturday.
Did you know, Baz, that Rutgers game last year, that was the last Big Ten game Nebraska won?
Yeah, that's right.
Hello, is that right?
Yeah. March 1st.
Late, yeah, it was late in the year. About the second to last one or third to last one of the year, something like that.
Yeah, 2 more. They came up 102 to Iowa 3 days later. Lost to Northwestern by 1 at the end of the season. Lost in the Big Ten tournament. So if you take – they won back-to-back games last year, Minnesota and Rutgers. But overall, the last 2 seasons so far, they're 3-26 in Big Ten play.
3 and what?
26.
In the Big Ten?
Yeah, that includes a tournament loss to Penn State.
Yeah, last win was against Rutgers. One more thing that illustrates the bottom of the Big Ten is not that bad. I mean, Nebraska's the bottom, but beyond Nebraska, I mean, think about Maryland just went to Rutgers and won. We're talking about Rutgers as a pretty tough team, and I believe they are. I mean, that team that beat Nebraska in Piscataway looked really good to me. Now, Nebraska played terrible defense that day, made them look good, but they're, as you saw, they're big physical team, strong, tough physical team.
Identity, yeah. Maryland beat Illinois by like 16 a week or 2 ago. Now Kofi was out, had a concussion, but still. Illinois, you know.
Yeah, no, Maryland's not that bad.
Yeah,
Northwestern's not bad.
I think Northwestern has 9 losses, and I think 6 of them by single digits, or maybe 1 possession, something like that. You know, it's, again, Minnesota is like 11-5 or something like that. You know, we're talking about the bottom of the Big Ten. So, yeah, it's just hard. It's hard, man.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Okay, football. What's going on, Parker, with quarterback recruiting? I don't know.
Well,
we don't have to.
They're recruiting quarterbacks.
They've got Chubba Purdy on campus. Sip, I don't know if you've heard of him.
Chubba.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's really been, I mean, as we've talked about every week, it's been sort of a mad dash since the end of the season, and it's been 2 months. Obviously, they brought in a big transfer class, and for the most part, finished off their 22 class. There's a couple things sort of left on the to-do list over the next few days. They have another junior day on Saturday. They can have a bunch of guys on campus, including J.J. Cole, who's one of the recruits that's sort of in the picture in terms of the quarterback position for 2023. And Frost, so this morning, Friday morning, they were in Wichita, Kansas to see Avery Johnson, who's maybe the top quarterback on their board for the 23 class. It's going to be interesting to see how that shapes up. J.J. Cole is going to be on campus for this junior day. Avery Johnson, previous commitment, is going to a junior day at Arkansas this weekend. And
Arkansas.
Yeah, and they're going to try to, and then Nebraska will get him to campus in March. So I think, I think Nebraska would like to get him up to campus this spring where they can shower him with attention rather than having it be a junior day that has, 35 guys or whatever on campus. And then the other thing to watch in terms of the current, the recruiting class is pretty much put together at this point, is the running back, Ajay Allen from Monroe, Louisiana, who visited last weekend, official visit. And then on Tuesday, Frost, Brian Applewhite, and Mickey Joseph were all down in Louisiana to see him and put the full court press on. So signing day is next week on Wednesday. It's funny, the February signing date almost counts for nothing at this point.
Yeah, I had kind of completely forgotten it was even happening until somebody mentioned it today.
Oh, right. Yeah, the second signing day. So I guess the ideal finish for Nebraska probably is if they are able to land Ajay Allen, who, if you follow recruiting, you may know he was committed to TCU when Brian Applewhite was the running backs coach there. So now obviously Applewhite's at Nebraska. Nebraska would like to land him. It'd be super interesting. I mean, he'd be the third running back of this class, along with Emmett Johnson, another high school kid, and then Anthony Grant, the junior college player who's on campus now for the spring semester. So basically, the way this lines up is they have a junior day this weekend. That we know of, they have no official visitors because Ajay Allen is basically the last guy left on their board for this year. Signing days on Wednesday. Hopefully we're going to hear from Scott Frost and maybe even Brian Applewhite and Bill Bush, the two newest additions to the staff. We'll see about that. But the thing about Frost is in December, he wasn't able to talk about the transfers. So essentially, if we get to talk to him on Wednesday, he could talk about, Ajay Allen, if they get him, plus all of the work they did in the transfer portal. So that's coming up. But otherwise, portal recruiting never really stops. The recruiting won't stop entirely, but the entire month of February is a dead period. So it'll kind of maybe actually slow down a little bit, knock on wood, I guess you might say. But honestly, it should just basically be the last 3 weeks of the winter conditioning program, a few days off, and then spring ball starts February 28th. A month. So
what's AJ Allen look like to you? What's his size?
Yeah, he's not like a Jaquez Yant or a Marquise Stepp, but he's listed at 5'11" and 190. He's a little bit of a smaller back, but he's got a little bit more of the Wan'Dale Robinson skill set. Now he's bigger than Wan'Dale, and he's probably not quite as prolific in terms of just the sheer sort of wow factor, make you miss ability that Wan'Dale had, but he's more like that. He's a little bit more, he's not built exactly like Wan'Dale or Maurice Washington, but he's a little bit more like those guys as a back than he is Yant. He's got some pizzazz to his game. He can run. He can make you miss. And he's really, Rivals considers him a 4-star prospect. I think 24/7's got him as a 3-star. That could be the other way around. Interestingly, On3, which is newer to the scene, but is staffed up and is trying to, really cover recruiting at a high level nationally. They've got him ranked as the number 108 player in the country and the number 5 running back in the country.
Really?
Yeah. So he's a good player. He's the kind of guy that, I think he's the type of guy that they had the connection with Brian Applewhite and they're in the mix for him. And he's just one of those guys that, they've got 2 running backs and they've got 6, on scholarship going into the spring, but he's a player that they clearly see as too good to pass up if they can get him.
I fade in and out of consciousness. Did you say that we will be talking? You think we'll get Applewhite and Bush on Wednesday?
It's possible. I haven't heard that for sure yet, but I think it's possible.
Applewhite, Bush, Frost, anybody else?
Be nice to talk to the quarterbacks, but
yeah, I'd like to see some. I'd like to see some. Yeah, I'd like to see some Casey Thompson, maybe some
Keith. If you're listening to this, how about all 16 transfers
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah. While you're at it, Trey Palmer would be nice. Brian Boomshini would be good.
You want
right?
to talk to the Boom Sheeny?
Yeah.
That's you're encroaching on my territory now, Sipple.
Punt
The
god,
hallway
the new
specialist
punt
guy.
god.
How's that?
I'm the hallway specialist guy.
Baz is the
You are
hallway
the
guy.
always.
Hey, listen.
You are
if
the
Brian,
hallway
Hey, listen.
specialist.
If Brian Bashini averages 45 yards net punting next fall, he's going to be a podium. He will not be a hallway guy.
You know where he's going to start though? You know where he's going to start though?
He's going to start in the hallway. Yeah,
With Baz.
With Baz, because Baz knows his role, and his role is in the hallway.
The hallway of Memorial Stadium.
He's a good team guy.
The first time Pristup was up there, did you look over at the gaggle and go, "Who is that?"
No, they announced them.
No.
I wish you could tell the Pristup story. That's wonderful, but we will not do that.
We will not do that.
Okay, so that's a pretty good football rundown. Baz had the occasion today of talking to Will Bolt and some Nebraska baseball players on the first day of practice.
First day of practice. We are 3 weeks out from the season opener for Nebraska baseball. February 18th, they play a 4-game series down at Sam Houston State down in Huntsville, Texas. We got to talk to Coach Will Bolt today. We talked to Max Anderson, freshman of the year in the Big Ten last year, and at least one publication's preseason Big Ten player of the year this year. I believe D1 Baseball has him as the preseason Big Ten player of the year. Also talked to Shea Shanneman, right-handed pitcher out of Grand Island, who was a part of the rotation last year and is going to be one of those guys kind of fighting for the Friday night starter role this year. And yeah, look, we just talked about basketball and it's grim and you don't see a way out. Baseball is defending Big Ten champs and they look pretty good, so it's a fascinating season, I think, because I think Nebraska is going to be pretty good and they're going to be picked by a lot of places to win the Big Ten. But boy, they got to replace some important guys. Spencer Schwellenbach, most notably, your second round draft pick. Cade Povich, your third round draft pick. Chance Roach, who is a solid rotation guy for you. Got to replace your entire outfield. You're replacing your 4 captains from last year. Guys like Jackson Hallmark, Mojo Hagee, Joe Acker. So there's real talent on this roster. But a lot of it's unproven. They didn't play midweek games last year, of course, with the Big Ten only schedule. So a lot of these young guys didn't get to play. And this is going to be their first chance to kind of get thrown into it and fill some pretty big roles. So it was, Will Bolt talked like a guy today that is coaching a team that won a championship last year. Talked about just kind of trying to carry that momentum from last year into this year, how that's important. But at the same time, you've got to wake up every day and say, you know what, it's about winning today. We've got to take care of today and getting better today. And you can tell that message is kind of starting to filter down to his guys. And he said it. He said in the fall, we probably had, out of 40 guys on the roster, we probably had 25 guys that understood that, the guys that were coming back, plus maybe like 5 freshmen that kind of understood that that's how you have to do it. It's that grind of every day and showing up every day. And he said now that we're into the spring, it's probably closer to 30 or so. So he said, if we can get that up to 40 by the time the first game gets here, we're going to be all right. I think Nebraska likes their talent. I think Nebraska likes their depth. And right now, you're not going to maybe duplicate what you had last year as far as cohesion and how close that team was and the belief that team had. But you've got some pieces there that in the conference you play in can make you pretty good. And so we'll see what it looks like when the games get here. But I think they kind of like where they're at right now. It's just kind of about these next 3 weeks, figuring out where pieces are going to fit and kind of going from there.
Do you have a good handle, or do they have a good who do you think the rotation would be right now?
I think that's one of the big question marks. And Will said it, they're probably looking at 7 or 8 guys. Right?
Okay.
So there's obviously some guys you think of. Shea Shanneman is going to be in that group. I think that's kind of the main guy. I'm looking up all the pitchers right now. I want to make sure I don't forget anybody. I'm curious to see where a guy like Colby Gomez fits into this, coming off some injuries. I think he's more of a back of the bullpen guy. Where does Cody Frank fit into it? He was kind of a long reliever for them last year. Do you stretch him out? Just Drew Christo, the touted freshman, how does he factor into this? I think he's got the talent to be there. Braxton Bragg. I could go up and down the list. Quinn Mason pitched for him last year. Dawson McCarville and Mason Ornelas were both D1 pitchers last year at Grand Canyon and Texas A&M respectively. Those guys are going to be in the mix. So there's some options there. And it's going to be interesting because they play that 4-game series right out of the gate. So you're going to need 4 starters right out of the gate against a team that'll be pretty good in Sam Houston State. So there's options there. I think you look at Max Sanderson, probably pretty entrenched at third. You probably slide Bryce Matthews from second over to shortstop. Probably your best athlete, a really good player.
Okay.
You probably need a second baseman. Does Cam Chick fit in there? He played some second base last year.
Oh yeah, Cam Chick certainly fits in there, doesn't he? Bat?
Yeah, gives you a really good bat, and has pretty good glove too. He's certainly capable.
Got power from the second base. He got power at second base.
Yeah, power from the left-hand side at second base. Question mark at first base. Who do you put there? Question marks all across the outfield. I think that outfield spot, you're going to see a lot of young guys play. Could be 3 guys that maybe haven't played any college baseball before, starting out there. So we'll see what that looks like. Kyle Perry, that's another guy I need to mention as a pitcher, a guy that's
pitcher.
Yeah, a guy that was a bulldog for them last year when he got back from Tommy John. So yeah, the culture, I think they like where it's at, especially with how it kind of carried them last year. And that's kind of going to be the thing is how do those guys this year fit into that culture? Because they're going to have to kind of figure some things out here the next 3 weeks and probably the first couple of weeks into the season to kind of see where pieces fit.
As when you got a recruiting class like the one they have coming in, obviously there's a lot of talk about Christo and some of those guys. And I know, Chase Mason left and all that, but like, how does that group fit in? Like, is it an opportunity for maybe more of them to make a big impact because there's so many question marks, or do you just sort of temper expectations on young guys?
It's interesting because I think the class that came in before this one, they basically had a redshirt year last year, right? Yeah. Without the midweek games. So they've been in it. And now that's not to say a guy like Drew Christo's not going to get to play. He's just got so much talent, and even a guy like CJ Hood from out of Norris, same type of deal. But it's just, it's hard to kind of place it right now, I think, because you had such a big class last year that didn't get to play and didn't get an opportunity and maybe has a little bit of a head start, as far as like I said, just understanding what the coaches want out of them every day, understanding what we need to do. So that's one of the questions you have to get answered if you're Will Bolton, his staff. There's big time talent in this class. There's no question about that. There's pretty good talent in that last class too. And they just didn't get on the field because of the way the roster set up, the way the schedule broke as well. So, I think you'll see some of those guys maybe early. I think you'll see a lot of those guys in some of those early midweeks as they're kind of trying to sort things out and shake things out. But they've got a lot of guys that they need to see, basically. You kind of know what you have in the guys that you have back, but you don't have a ton of guys back. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of auditioning, certainly in practice and scrimmages and stuff, and maybe even those first couple series of the year to kind of see where some of those young guys fit in. But some of those guys are going to have a real shot just based on what Nebraska needs right now.
3 weeks away is a 4-game series against Sam Houston State.
The schedule's interesting. They play 4 at Sam Houston State. Then they go back down to Arlington the next week and play 3 against TCU, who's preseason top 20 team, pretty consensus. Playing them in the Rangers ballpark, Globe Life Park, brand new park. Then they go right back to Arlington the week after that and play Northwestern State and UT Arlington. And then you're into your midweek games, Kansas State, and then you get the home opener against Long Beach State on March 11th. Long Beach State coming to Nebraska on March 11th to play a little baseball. We'll see how the California
just like you draw it up.
I'm sure those guys are going to be loving that when it's about 42 degrees on that Friday afternoon. So it's an interesting schedule because they've got Sam Houston State's good. That's probably a top 50 program nationally. TCU we know is good. There's not a whole lot of real gimmies on this schedule. So going to be really interesting to watch it play out. We know they've got some really talented guys back. We know they've got some talented young guys waiting in the wings, and now it's just a matter of kind of figuring out how it all fits together. So interesting time for baseball.
Hey, Baz, can I ask you one more question about baseball?
Please do. Yes.
Like Sipple, I sort of drift in and out of consciousness. And I had to beg off there for a minute to I just let out some laughs about the Pristup story that hopefully we can tell at some point. But what's Nebraska going to do at catcher? Like, is the young guy, like, is he can he win the job, or is it Griffin Everett? Like, how does that shake out?
Griffin Everett's the guy there right now. And he got a lot better as the year went on. If a lot of our listeners will probably remember, he had the real big hit against Arkansas last year. He had the go-ahead RBIs against Arkansas last year in that regional game to send it to the regional final. And we talked to him in the fall. Dude's a senior this year, been around it a while, stepped in last year right away and was really, really good behind the dish, swung a good enough bat. I think he's going to show a little more power this year. But I think they really like Griffin Everett. I think when they name captains this year, Griffin Everett's going to be one of those guys. I think they really like him. Now you need another one or two because, a catcher is such a hard position. So what does that look like? Does that mean, like a Drew Wessel out of Omaha, out of Millard South, does he kind of fit into this redshirt freshman? You've got a JUCO guy, Nick Wimmers, coming in who played JUCO ball. You've got a true freshman in Josh Karen, who was a stud athlete up in Wisconsin, went to Sun Prairie and was a multi-sport guy, played football, of course, and that's another guy you can look at. So they've got some options there. But Griffin Everett's your guy right now. And then behind him, it's three guys that have played probably exactly 0 innings of Division I baseball at the power conference level. So we'll see how that kind of shakes out.
Good job, Baz. That's a really good rundown. I'm going to have to listen to it again. There's going to be a lot of new faces is what I'm hearing.
15 new guys basically is what it is. And again, it's how those guys kind of fit in, culture wise, bringing it everyday wise. We know kind of who the stars are, of course, when we talk about those guys, Max Anderson and Bryce Matthews and guys like that, but Griffin Everett, but it's going to be, where does, the Max Petersons, the Jack Stiles, guys like that, where do they kind of fit into this? So there's a lot of new things.
Yeah.
So
write
we'll
a good
see.
Thorough story. Yeah.
It'll be thorough. There'll be a lot of stuff coming on baseball over the next several days. Like we got a lot of stuff today, so we'll dive deep. Okay, it'll be thorough enough. All right.
Super long.
There's a roster online you can go look at, Steve. I don't know if you knew that, but if you go to Huskers.com and go to the baseball page, they have a roster there.
I would like some expertise attached to the roster. And I wonder, I don't know, this is the kind of stuff, I call this the sort of question my mom might ask. No disrespect to my mom. She's just not a sports fan. I mean, it's like, is there this sort of inherent, like, oh God, I hope the baseball team can do something because a men's sport needs to do something. One of the top men's sports needs to do something.
I'm glad you say that, Sip, because I don't think he feels that. I don't think that's how Will operates. And Will. And the thing I'll always remember about Will is the quote he had last year after they beat Arkansas, where he said, you got to have that dog in you and you got to be ready to come to the fight. And that Will's not worried about what the basketball team's record is or what the football team's doing. Now, do they pay attention to that stuff? Of course, but it's not like they're sitting there when he's talking to Lance Harvell and Jeff Christie. It's not like he's going, God, guys, we better go win 35 or 40 games this year. Like they don't operate like that. They just don't, because that's not how Will Bolt operates. And I think that's what gives this team an advantage is they've taken on the identity of their coach. And Sip, it as a player and you've seen it. Will Bolt's a badass. He's a tough dude and he doesn't take any crap, and that's kind of how he built this team last year. That's what they're trying to get to this year. It might take a little longer this year than it took last year, but I think they have the pieces to get there eventually. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take them to kind of get to that level.
Good job, Bass. Good reminder of that quote. What did he say? He said, you got to.
I need to find it because it's you. If he basically, it was after they beat Arkansas in Game 6 of the regional in front of 11,000. He said it was a great quote, and he said you got to have that dog in you. You got to be with that guy that says you got to be ready for the throwdown. That's what it was. You got to be all about the throwdown.
All about the throwdown.
You got to be all about the throwdown. And like I'm sitting in the press box, like ripping my shirt off as he's saying this, like, let's go, Will. But I mean, that's what it is, right? Like you're not going to, are you going to hear, and I don't mean to knock on Fred, but are you going to hear Fred Hoiberg say that at a press conference? You got to be ready for the throwdown.
It'd be really weird if Fred said that. Yeah.
It'd be really, again, different personalities, different
personalities.
I get, yes. But I mean, that kind of illustrates the difference, I think, a little bit in the programs. And I'm not saying there's a right way to do it or a wrong way to do it or whatever, but that's the baseball team has taken on Will Bullett's persona, and that's not a bad place to start, considering the kind of guy Will is and the kind of competitor he is. So
Yeah. Yeah, baseball's a little bit more about the throwdown than basketball, but that's interesting. That's an interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting.
all right, guys.
When it's
you know what?
grim,
So-
be the Grim Reaper.
that's
Would you
right.
quit calling me the Grim Reaper?
Well, would you rather the Grim Reaper came after you, or would you rather be the Grim Reaper?
Okay. All right. Yeah,
It's all
you
right.
turned that on me. You turned that on me effectively. Thank you.
Turn it around like a little 84-mile-an-hour fastball right over
Yeah.
the middle of the plate.
84.
On that note, speaking of grim, we're going to end this podcast now while we're ahead. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.
All right.